Welcome to the #1 source for information, news, and opinion on your Columbus Blue Jackets. This is CBJin30, presented by Telhio Credit Union. You can also find the audio version on the CBJ Radio SoundCloud page, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, Google Play Music, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Now here's your host, Bob McElligott.
Welcome to a Star Wars Day edition of CBJin30, presented by Telhio Credit Union. That's right. May the 4th be with you. Might as well have a little bit of fun today, right? I mean, that's what this day is all about. That's why this got created, who knows how many years ago. Actually, as I was getting some stuff ready for the show and I was looking at different things, I was looking at the history of how Star Wars Day got going and how basically a joke turned into reality here. So, and isn't that true of so many things in life, so many things in the world? Something that was meant to be sarcastic, was meant to be funny, then turns into regular reality and a part of the culture. Yeah, it's not the first time it's happened. It won't be the last time that it happens. But so may the 4th be with you today. I remember the first Star Wars movie, quite honestly, not in great detail. Here's what I remember. When I was growing up, I was more of a Star Trek kid. And the reason was because I used to come home from school and it used to be on in the afternoons. It used to be on, they would do the syndicated programming in the afternoons, late in the afternoons. This was long before the days that the news started at 5 o'clock in the afternoon or 4:30 or 4, whatever time it starts now, who knows. It was long before the days where you had afternoon talk shows that late in the day. Just didn't exist, right? So you came home, there was an after-school special on, or there was syndicated programming. So one of the syndicated programs that was on in my lifetime was Star Trek. It was on from 5 to 6, and it ran 5 days a week. So it was very easy to, see it and, get into it and catch up on it because it was 5 days a week. So it was going on all the time. So I was more of a Star Trek kid and probably more of a Star Trek guy. No, definitely more of a Star Trek guy now. I mean, how could I not like Captain Kirk? It's just the way it is, right? But I remember again, this is dating myself, but, facts are facts and life is what it is. It was 1977, and my dad was always on the cutting edge of movies, it seemed. Like if there was a big movie coming out, I didn't really know about it at that point as a kid, but he did. He did. And going to the movies back then was special because there was, in the little town that I grew up, there was one theater with one screen. That was it. So you kind of got whatever they had, and it didn't seem that they would get the big movies when they opened. You had to wait a couple of weeks, maybe wait a month until those movies finally made it there. So it was a big deal when a new movie came out, and you would have to leave town to go see it. So I remember distinctly we went to Johnstown, Pennsylvania, because in a mall there was a movie theater that had 2 screens. Oh yeah, 2 screens. So I remember us going there to see this movie that was called Star Wars, and I really didn't know anything about it. Again, he was the one that had heard the hype and did the research or whatever you want to say. And it was his thing. But we went, and I remember being there as a kid. And, it's one of the things that I remember fondly about being with my dad, because there were a couple of movies that were like that. My dad was a huge Superman fan growing up. So when Christopher Reeve came out with the first Superman movie, I remember us doing the same thing. We took the Trek and we went to see that movie. And when Superman 2 came out, we went to see that movie. So, he was good for doing that. And Star Wars was one of the very first ones, if not the first one, that I remember that was a big deal. That was a big trip. And we went and we saw the movie. And of course, you loved it, as everybody did. I loved the bad guy. I just, in that very opening scene where Darth Vader comes through the door and you see this guy all dressed in black with this weird mask and the heavy breathing. And it was, to me, it was a bad guy like no other bad guy that I'd even seen. But it was a bad guy that was, I liked him. I liked the bad guy. I don't know. It's probably the voice, probably the James Earl Jones voice had a lot to do with it. But it was an intriguing character. And then, of course, the way it worked out over the first 3 movies, that, he ends up being a bad guy turned good guy. And then you go back and see how he was a good guy turned into a bad guy. and all that stuff. But that was my favorite character by far. There's no question about that. So yeah, it's the 4th day of May. Here we are. I'm ready to answer your questions about the Blue Jackets, about the NHL. See, I have my my Kraft Hockeyville here. Get my microphone out of the way here. My Kraft Hockeyville T-shirt on today, reminding me of some better times when the Blue Jackets took on the Buffalo Sabres in Clinton, New York. Although it wasn't good times for Seth Jones back then. Remember, he got hurt and then he missed a couple of weeks, but Blue Jackets made it through that, and they had Seth Jones back, and they got into the playoffs last year and did some great things, as we've talked about many times over the course of the past couple of weeks. So, yeah, that's just a little bit of a throwback today. I saw this shirt, and I haven't worn it in quite a while, and I thought, you know what? Today's the day. Let's remember some better times in the NHL. Speaking of better times in the NHL, there's a good possibility that this will be a week filled with NHL news, and that will be well, we'll find out better today, because there is a Board of Governors meeting this afternoon. One of the big topics they are expected to talk about is the NHL draft. Now, you remember the NHL draft weeks ago, months ago, maybe it was postponed. It was supposed to happen in Montreal at the end of June. They postponed the draft, and they haven't rescheduled it. Now, what the general thinking was, at least it was my thinking, and if I was wrong, I was wrong, and I might be wrong, but I don't know if it was my fault or if it's just the way that everything is working out. But the general thought process was the season would be pushed back, get underway, hopefully in July, play July, August, maybe early September, award the Stanley Cup, come back with a draft, come back with free agency, and then come back eventually with training camps. Now, we were talking about training camps and getting a season going in November. Now, all of a sudden, December seems to be the month that they're talking about. That's the popular thing to talk about. And again, this is all fluid. None of this is written in stone. And the reason is because nobody knows where the numbers are going on this coronavirus. They're better now. Is going to come back in the fall, as some people are, trying to drum up and scare you to death about right now, or is it not? Or if it comes back, is it going to be as bad? Are you going to be able to have people at games? All this stuff. So we don't know. We have absolutely positively no idea. So that is going to be a wait and see type of thing. But it looks as though the league is going to, well, they're very strongly considering, and I wouldn't be surprised if they do it, they're going to put the draft ahead of the completion of the season, which is a little bit strange. But then again, these are strange times. So what is being discussed right now is an early June draft. So not even late June like it was supposed to be, but early June is what they're talking about, which means that decisions have to be made pretty quickly here, because we're already in the first week of May. That would give you about a month to get things done and lined up. And there's a lot of business to go over before the league and the teams can get to that stage of where we are right now. And one of the biggest things is conditional draft picks, because so many times in this league there are trades that are made and there's a draft pick involved, but there's a condition on that pick. And one good example is New Jersey has a pick that they got from Tampa, but the original pick came from Vancouver. Vancouver had the pick. They dealt it to Tampa in the JT Miller trade last summer. And then when Blake Coleman was sent to Tampa by New Jersey got the pick. So anyway, what it is it's one of these types of deals, and I'm not going to look up the specifics of it, but bear with me here. If Vancouver's a playoff team, then the first round pick is under one condition. If they're not a playoff team, then it becomes a different condition. So that's the kind of thing that's going to have to be sorted out. And from what I've read, there are like 15 of those deals that were made that have conditional draft picks that'll have to be sorted out by the league. Now, the league apparently feels that they are going to be able to sort all of that out, and they're going to be able to get that done, and the people are going to be at least happy enough with it that they'll be able to do this draft. So that's one of the things that they are going to be working on very heavily. But, so you're talking about having a draft before you finish a season. So where does everybody go in the order of things? Is it going to be a draft position by percentage points? And again, for the Blue Jackets, if they started the season tomorrow, if they restarted tomorrow and went right to the playoffs and they used percentage points, the Blue Jackets would be out and wouldn't even be a part of the postseason. But if they went by the standings where they were when everything paused, they were in a playoff spot. So when it comes to the draft, how does that work? Are they going to be a lottery team or are they not going to be a lottery team? Is the lottery going to be what it has been like last year, where everybody not in the playoffs has at least somewhat of a chance to win the lottery? Are they going to go back to the old system where you can only move up a spot or whatever it is, which would essentially mean that Detroit or Ottawa was going to get that first overall pick? What are they going to do with that? And I think that situation is more likely. That from what I read, it looks like that situation is more likely. They're going to go back to the old rules for this year. So there are a lot of questions. Like with all of this stuff, there are a lot of questions, and there need to be answers. And in this case, there's going to need to be answers coming up sooner than later. So I'm sure they've been working on this for a long time already in the league office. And if they, they have to have information about this call today. You don't go into a call and say, hey, what do you guys think? Because that's already been done. I was reading some stories this weekend about, general managers. There are some that aren't happy about this at all. There's some that think that this should just wait until they see if the season can be completed. And then if so, go ahead and have the draft like you normally would. And you already have everybody in position and all that stuff. But look, if the league wants to have it, the league's going to have it. I think that's cut and dry. And I don't mean that in a bad way, because if they think that this is what's best for the league and for the sport, that's what they're going to do. That's what they get paid to do. They've got to make those kind of decisions. They got to do that kind of stuff. So if it's in the best interest of the league, then go ahead and do it. And one of the things that makes it in the best interest of the league, let's be honest, it's the fact that it's actual content and it is broadcast content. The TV networks are looking for things to put on the air. You saw what happened with the NFL draft. Now, believe me, I'm not telling you that the NHL draft is going to pull numbers like the NFL draft did. I'm not saying that whatsoever. It's not. It's not going to pull those numbers. Those numbers were massive. They were unbelievable. And it is for, arguably the most popular league in the world. Okay? So take that into consideration. But you've got nothing. There's nothing going on. And you have a chance to put some kind of content on the air, some actual real hockey content. Teams getting new players in their system, getting better, all that stuff. So there's no doubt there's a big attraction there for the league and the broadcast networks to go ahead and do this. It would be done virtually, like the NFL draft was. And the thing about that was, a lot of people were waiting to see how that turned out. What did it look like? How many snafus were there along the way? Are they able to pull it off? Well, they did. They pulled it off, and they did a pretty good job of it. I mean, there were, little things here and there, but you expect little things when you're doing a draft like that, when you have people that aren't sitting in the same studio, that are all over the place, and you're trying to coordinate between everybody. So there were things that were bound to happen, and it was going to happen and not be perfect. That was okay, but they pulled it off. They pulled it off really well. So now the other leagues are looking at it and saying, okay, it can be done. And again, the NHL is not looking at it and saying, man, if we can draw that many people to it, that's not what it's about. It's about drawing your fans in, keeping the interest in the league, giving people something, giving them something. I think just is what it is. Give them something. Right now, there's nothing to give. There are no games. There's nothing to give except chats with the players, which have been great. There's nothing to give except the replays of old games, which have been great, but the outcome of the games. It's nice to go back and watch it, but if your choice is to go back and watch it or watch something brand new, you're going to watch something brand new, right? It's just human nature, fact of life. So the league can actually give the fans something here. They can give the broadcast network something. They can give the teams something. There are a lot of challenges to it. And again, no question. And there are some GMs that I'm sure just hate this idea, but they know they're going to have to deal with it, and they're going to go along with it, and they're going to find a way to get it done and all that stuff. The challenge for them is they're missing out on certain things. They've already missed, the playoffs in junior, where they like to go watch guys and see how they perform in a playoff atmosphere. That's a big thing. That's a really big thing for scouts in hockey. In the American Hockey League all the time, we would talk about the fact that you're in the playoffs. It's tough in the American Hockey League because you're not getting paid, but you're in the playoffs. You're not in the National Hockey League. So, sometimes it's that motivation. Where do you find that motivation to continue to play? Why am I going to stay here in the city and away from my family for another 2 months when I'm not getting paid? you know, First of all, there's a level of professionalism to it. So that's going to carry you. But you're playing for 30 other teams every time you do that. And there have been many guys that have gotten NHL opportunities because they have played well in the American Hockey League playoffs. There's no question about that. So when you put all that together, uh, there's a good reason. So that's why scouts like to watch guys play in the playoffs. They want to see what kind of playoff players they are. They want to see, in the case of the American Hockey League, this guy's not getting paid. Is he still busting his tail, or is he interested or not interested? Right? Junior hockey, you want to go in there, you want to see how they battle because they want to get a chance to win the Memorial Cup and all that stuff. So scouts are not getting that. But it's scouts across the board. It's not just one team or 5 teams or 10 teams. It's everybody. Nobody's getting that. So everything is being relegated to what the scouts have already seen live during this past year or years prior to that, and the video that they have. It's as simple as that. I think maybe for the general managers, maybe they lose out more because they don't get a chance to go and watch these kids play in person at the end of the year when they want to watch them in the different kind of atmosphere that I just talked about. So they don't get to see that, but their scouts have. Their scouts have been there. They've been following these guys for months, if not years. And so this is where you're really, really relying on that scouting staff going into a draft like this. No combine. I saw a quote from one general manager, and I can't remember who it was, or maybe it wasn't even attributed. But it talked about the combine. The thing you're missing with that is, they test their strength, and you don't get a chance to see, how strong is this kid actually right now, and where do you think he's going to be come July for training camp under normal circumstances, and then into September or July for rookie camp, and September for regular camp. They can't gauge that because they don't have this combine. I don't know. I don't know if I guess it's important to some guys that, the combines are probably really important to some general managers, and they're probably not as important to other general managers. Who knows? I don't know. Anyway, they normally have them. They don't have them this year. They don't get to go through all of that. So look, it's a lot of adjustments that are going to have to be made, but the rumblings seem to be that they are looking to do this, and they're looking to do it in about a month. So the ball should start rolling. If that's going to happen, the ball has to start rolling. There's no doubt. And then that will fuel a lot of speculation and a lot of conversation. And I saw the column from Larry Brooks today out of New York, and he did have a good point, I thought, in his column, where he said it's okay to have the draft, but you have to have it tied to your plan to conclude the 2019-2020 season. And I think that's fair. And I would imagine that that's not only just being talked about, and that it's probably getting done, I would think. So again, as with everything else, I've said this to you for 6 weeks or so now. It's more questions than answers. I think maybe we're finally getting to that point, though. Finally getting to that point where there will start to be answers and not just questions. So I'm looking forward to that. There's no doubt about it. I'm looking forward to that. As I was talking about, the American Hockey League and the playoffs there, and guys that can create opportunities by the way they played in the playoffs, and also about having my Kraft Hockeyville shirt on today. Last week I got a great opportunity to go on a call in Syracuse with some guys that were, how many was on with? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 guys that played there in the 2007, 2008 season. Was that right? 2007, 2008. And one of the guys I think really fit the bill in what I'm talking about, and that is former Blue Jacket Derrick McKenzie. I think he really got a great opportunity when he played in the American Hockey League. He played in Chicago for the Wolves, and it was run like a big league organization there. No doubt about it. They were good. They had a good roster, and he got to play with good people. But the Blue Jackets saw what he did there. They were a team that was always – they were in the postseason. That was pretty much a given. It was a rite of spring that they were going to be in the postseason. I think he is one of those guys that really got an opportunity to do that get seen there, get a chance to join a new organization. We know how it worked out for him here. It worked out really well for him. It worked out so well that when his contract was up, the Florida Panthers were fond enough of him to sign him to a big contract. Well, I mean, big for him. It was a 3-year deal, I believe it was. He got good money, he got family security, and he went to Florida. He was the captain of the Florida Panthers for a bit, and now that he's retired, he is on the coaching staff of the Florida Panthers. So that is as I was talking earlier about that opportunity that you get when you're in the American Hockey League, that's a good example of it. But it was great to talk to Derrick this week. He was on with a couple former Blue Jackets, Zenon Konopka, Tom Sestito, and the other guy was John Morasti, who never had a chance to play here in Columbus, but he was a legend for his fighting in the American Hockey League. So I got to do that last week. It was a lot of fun. It was, old stories and old times. It's funny when you get together with guys like that because the clock is turned back so quickly, right? I mean, everybody looks older. Everybody, Konopka's bringing his kids on camera for the call and all this stuff. But it's like turning back time because the stories are the same and you laugh just as hard and maybe harder because you appreciate the stories even more. And there are some stories that you'd forgotten about, and then somebody brings them up and starts talking about them, and and it's a lot of fun. So I did enjoy doing that in the past week. So I'd like to thank the Syracuse Crunch for including me on that call. It was one of the highlights of the week. There's no question about it. Absolutely. So speaking of highlights, let me make some for you right now as get ready to go to your questions. It is a Monday mailbag, so time to go to your questions, which have been tweeted to me at Bobby Mac Sports on Twitter, or maybe you sent me an email, Bobby Mac, BOBBYMAC at bluejackets.com. I'm going to start with Twitter because this first one that I have is from, and I got to put the Father Time getting me. I got to put the glasses on to be able to read it right. This is from Mike the Fireman. And Mike says, so it doesn't seem proper to award the Stanley Cup if a full season cannot be played. Therefore, I propose, if we ever get going again this season, a single game elimination tournament for the O'Brien Cup. The top half of the current standings would be in. Well, I mean, it's going to be the Stanley Cup. Let's just say that. No matter what they do, it's going to be the Stanley Cup. But the everybody in thing it's not a terrible idea to me. It's really not a terrible idea. And I'll tell you why. Because right now they're talking about teams coming back and finishing regular season games. And the reason for that, if you missed my conversation with Mike Russo from The Athletic last Friday, you can go back and pull that up. One of the reasons for that, not the reason for that, but one of the reasons for that is about television revenue. And I read another article about it this weekend where, teams have deals with their regional cable outlets and X amount of games have been promised and they may not be at that threshold for the number of games that have been promised. So that is part of a reason because that's revenue, right? I mean, if you have to start paying back and if every team has to pay some back for their own local television deal, then what happens is maybe that's money that's taken out of the big pie for next year, if you will. It's less money in the pot for next year. And you're already looking for money for next year because of what you've lost and you're trying to make up through the playoffs. So that's also why there's been a lot of talk about expanded playoffs. There might be some teams, and I don't know. I don't know. But there might be some teams that wind up in the playoffs this year that wouldn't have been. Maybe it's expanded from 16 to 24. That seems to be the magic number that has been thrown out when there's talk about expanding the playoffs, going 12 per side. So, you're already looking to make up revenue. I think you're trying not to take any more revenue out of that mix. That's my guess. So, okay, so here's my point on this thing. And this is me, and what do I know? But if you're the Red Wings and you have to come back and play regular season games, if you're the Ottawa Senators and you have to come back and play regular season games, and I'm talking about teams that have zero chance of making the playoffs, absolute zero. And there's 5 other ones. If you go with 24, there's 5 others that are going to be on that list. But if you have to come back and play something anyway, why not just put them in a tournament? It could be single game elimination. They'll play a game and they'll get knocked out, or they'll play a game and they'll beat somebody. And that will be, that'll be newsworthy and shocking and all that stuff. So it's not out of the realm of possibility for me. I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's going to be expanded beyond the 16. I don't see the 31 team tournament, but then again, like I said, everything is different now. Everything is different. Who knows? I don't know. You don't know. The league knows. The league has an idea. Again, they've been working on this for a long time. They've been working on all this stuff since the league paused. Another thing they're working on is, they had teams submit to become one of the hub cities if they go that route. And the story I read today said there were 11 to 14 teams that, submitted their information that they would like to be in the mix on that. And we talked extensively last week about Columbus and about the upside of Columbus and what it brings to the table as far as having multiple teams playing at Nationwide Arena and the practice rink attached to it and all the other rinks around town and the hotels downtown and all that stuff. So that'll be interesting to see where that goes. And there's also talk about, a little bit of player pushback, and I don't know how big it is, where they don't want to go away from their families for 2 months and be quarantined in a hotel. And again, I get that too, but it's going to be a compromised situation. There's going to be give and take, whatever's done here along the way. I don't think there's any question about that. There's not only going to be, there has to be give and take and what's going on. And that's why it's good to see that the Players Union and the league have been working together literally in lockstep and in unison to get things done here. Here's another tweet that this is one I didn't get to earlier, and I want to get to it today and try to clear this up a little bit. It's from Brad Fleming, who says, can you go into detail on how two-way contracts work and why some players have to clear waivers to go to the minors and others don't? Well, just the two-way contract, Brad, is simply this. You've got a player, if they're signed to a two-way, and Nathan Gerby's a good example. Nathan Gerby's a good example for many reasons in this, okay? So for Nathan Gerby, he gets a two-way contract, which means if he plays in the National Hockey League, he makes this salary, which is a higher salary, obviously. If he plays in the American Hockey League, he gets this salary. So when he gets called up, they adjust his pay accordingly for the time that he is up. And when he goes back down, they readjust it for him being back down and all that stuff. So that is a two-way contract, okay? You play at different monetary levels. Depending upon the league level, that's what the monetary level is. That is a two-way contract. Now, a guy that comes in on his first contract, entry-level contract, 3-year deal, those guys can go back and forth as they please. Sonny Milano, the last couple of years, he was up and down, right? Now, if he had gotten into next year as a member of the Blue Jackets, they wouldn't have had that luxury with him, because after your initial 3-year deal, then you would have to clear waivers to go back down. Like out of training camp, they would have had to, put them on waivers and stuff like that. So, so that was, those things factor in. And in Sonny's case, it factored in. There's no doubt about it. They played him here for a while. They could never find a good fit for him. They knew that as they moved ahead, they would have to sign him to a contract. Then he would have to clear waivers and, say what you want to about him. If you put him on waivers, there's probably a good chance that somebody will take a chance on him. Figure there's always a team that thinks that they can fix somebody. And I'm not saying that Sonny's broken. I'm just saying if he doesn't fit in with you, doesn't mean that the entire league goes, well, if he doesn't fit with them, he's not going to fit with anybody. Because there's always a team that thinks we can fix him. We can make him work for us. And sometimes it happens. Most times, what happens? He doesn't work here, then he doesn't work there, and he doesn't work there, and then he just doesn't work. But that's not going to stop teams from trying. So, to have to put him through waivers, assign him to a contract, and then have to put him through waivers and have the risk of somebody taking him, get something while you can get something, which they did. You go a little bit further, and I said Nathan Gerby is a good example because he's an older guy, and so he's got the two-way contract. He gets called up to play. Now, in his type of deal, because of his age and his service and all that stuff, he gets to play 10 games in the NHL. And if he plays over that, then if they go to send him back down, then he too has to clear waivers. So you run a risk there. Sometimes, in most times, to be honest with you, most times another team is not going to take that guy because they are usually guys that are veteran players They have a lot of American Hockey League time. They have a little bit of National Hockey League time. And everybody knows they're a role player for the AHL team, and they're a leader and most times a captain, all that stuff. So teams don't always, or I can't say they don't ever, because it happens at times. But for the most part, teams don't go out and pluck other guys off waiver wires like that. So, but you still have to clear. So you still run that risk, right? So you still run it. Nathan Gerbe's situation earlier this year, he got that contract extension. So even had he gone back to the American Hockey League and somebody took him on waivers, now they got to take the contract with him, which is another thing that other teams have to think about. So he gets that extension. So you put him on waivers. It probably makes it easier to send him back down to the American Hockey League. So those are some of the factors that are involved, and basically those are the factors that are involved. The guys coming in on their entry level contract in the first 3 years, you can pretty much go as you please. Although there might be a certain number by the time they get to that third year, with a guy like Pierre-Luc Dubois. But anyway, but for the most part, it's come and go as you please. And then when they sign that second contract, and then you play X amount of games and you have to clear waivers before you get sent back. So again, always a risk that you run. And the Blue Jackets have been in that. Scott Harrington is a really good example of that. Some people say, why has Scott Harrington hung around here for as long as he has? Because there have been long stretches where he didn't play. He would go months without playing. And, some people question that. Well, why is that? Why do they keep him around? Well, because they felt that he was valuable and he really served a purpose here. But then again, if they send him back to Cleveland and somebody took him off waivers, then you lose that guy. So they never wanted to lose that guy. So that's another good example of it. So I hope that clears it up for you. I hope that clears up some of your questions about waivers. All right, one more thing here, and this is a question that came into me via email from Mark Cordell. So let's get Mark's question.
Hi, Bob. This is Mark Correll II. For the upcoming 20th anniversary season for the Blue Jackets, I'd like to see them bring back their original sweater as a throwback. Is there anything you'd like to see them do? Thanks.
Mark Correll II. Mark, I think I mispronounced your last name when I sent it into that, so I apologize for that. Mark Correll II. 20th anniversary season coming up. Mark wants to see the original sweater or jersey come back. Wants to know if there's anything I would like to see. Mark, I don't know. First of all, I don't know what the situation is next year. I think there's some things happening with the league as far as, doing some more things with different looks for all the teams. And I don't know what those are specifically, but I don't know if I'm sold on the original jersey coming back yet. And maybe you think that's weird, but I don't know. That might be a 25th anniversary thing for me. I'm not sure. But if it happens, that's great. I'm fine. If it happens, okay. But maybe it's something a little bit further down the road. It won't bother me either way. But is there something I would like to see? Yeah, let's go back to what I was talking about, the call that I was on with those former Blue Jackets earlier this year. I would just like to see more of some of those guys, and maybe not so much the big name guys that everybody knows so well. Maybe not. And I'm not saying not to have anything from these guys. Don't get me wrong. Okay. But it's easy to get the Sergei Fedorovs, the Ray Whitneys, the Jeff Sandersons, the Scott Hartnells, all that stuff. Okay. And all great guys and all big parts of what happened here. What I would like to see, and I proposed this, is I would like to go a little bit in a different direction and talk to some guys that they were here. Maybe you forgot that they were here. Maybe they weren't here long enough for you to remember. Maybe they were here for a short time, but they had a big contribution to what happened in a certain season or, somewhere along the way in franchise history. Those are the kind of guys I would like to talk to. And I thought about that this week when I was talking with Tom Sestito, because, Tommy was a guy, he was a highly touted prospect here. I think he played 13 games for the Blue Jackets. And then he went on to play in Philly, Vancouver, played for Torts in Vancouver, actually, and then finished with Pittsburgh. So those kind of guys, I would like to maybe get together with some of the guys that were the lesser known guys, or if I say the easily forgotten guys, I don't mean it as a rip on them. I mean they weren't here long enough, and people that when you hear about them or watch the interview, you'll go, oh yeah, I forgot about that game, or I forgot about that time, or I forgot about that guy until now. So that's what I would like to see, Mark. I would like to see something like that, and I intend to make something like that happen, quite frankly. And that's a great subject, by the way. What would you like to see? Because that 20th anniversary season is going to happen in some form, one form or another, right? It's going to happen. So what things would you like to see? Mark, that is a great a subject to bring up, because I'd be interested to get your feedback on that and what you would like to see as part of that 20th anniversary season. So again, this could be a big week for news, maybe for the draft, maybe for players coming back. I don't know. I saw yesterday there was talk about the Canadian Prime Minister saying that players that came back to Canada would have to quarantine. Well, yeah, no kidding. We pretty much all figured that. Players coming back to the U.S. are going to have to quarantine. That's why, speaking of getting the ball rolling here, even when you get the players back, there's probably going to be another 14-day period. So hopefully we start to get a little bit more as we go along and these states start opening a little bit slowly but surely. These states starting to open back up again. So we'll see what gives with that. What do I have for you? I have a Selfish Plug coming up tomorrow, Tuesday. I don't have all the information on this, but my good friend John Bartlett, who works in Canada for Rogers Sportsnet, and he calls games for the Leafs, and he does the Leafs, a lot of Leafs games. He does the other regional games, does some Montreal games, whatever. John, a couple of weeks ago, started doing a feature called From the Booth, and he has it on Instagram. You can go find him on Instagram, John Bartlett. He's done interviews with different broadcasters around the league and get their stories. He and Greg Millen, who he's partners with on Rogers Sportsnet. And I did a segment a couple of weeks ago. It's coming up tomorrow. They're going to release it tomorrow. He told me yesterday it's coming out tomorrow. So I'll make sure I put that information out. It was fun. It's good just to sit and talk with other guys. And Johnny is a guy that I've known from when he was doing the Toronto Marlies in the American Hockey League, and I was in Syracuse. So I've known him for a long time. I love him. I'm honored that he put me on the list. I mean, you should see the people on the list that they've had on already. And Darren Pang was on there. Christine Simpson was on there. Elliot Friedman was on the other day. Kelly Rudy was on there. I mean, I look at the list and I'm thinking, do I belong on this list? And then I say, yes, of course I belong on this list. No question. So that's coming up, and I will make sure that you know about it. Also, later this week, Jody Shelley and I will do another Blue Jackets drop-in, and we're going to talk with Cam Atkinson, who's got a virtual 5K coming up, and I'm going to have more information for you on that when we get to that drop-in, and then I'm going to remind you about that for the rest of the month because you have to register by the end of the month. But Cam setting up this virtual 5K. It's a fundraiser. It's going to get it to he's got a really good cause here, and he's going to help the people on the front lines in this pandemic battle. And when I have more information for you, I will give it to you. But we're going to talk to Cam coming up later in the week about all of that. Okay? So that gets you set on what's happening. Thanks for being here. Thanks for your questions. As always, that's going to do it for a Monday Mailbag edition of CBJin30, presented by Telhio Credit Union. Until next time, I'm Bob McElligott saying so long.